Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. Let me start with the work scenario that most of you will recognize. There's this guy at work who technically checks all the boxes. He shows up, he's got the qualifications, he does just enough to say he's doing his job. But he forgets things. He misses important details and he needs reminders. He asks others to cover up for him when he falls short. And when it's brought to his attention, he is genuinely confused. He isn't trying to be difficult. He thinks his effort should count for more than it does. From the outside, it's obvious. From his seat, it makes no sense. As a manager or a business owner, you don't keep someone like that around forever. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because the role requires more than just showing up. Now, here's where this starts to matter at home. Many men are doing something quite similar at home in their marriages. They go to work, they provide, they handle their responsibilities, and they assume that that should translate into being seen as a good husband, into appreciation, into closeness, into desire. It doesn't. Because being a provider is a role. Being a husband is a relationship, and those require different skills. When effort in one role is expected to earn credit in the relationship, it starts to feel transactional. Now, she's not ungrateful. It's because that is how relationships work. If this feels familiar, stay with me. Most men were never taught the difference, and it matters way more than you think. Welcome to episode 41, Why Providing and Protecting Aren't Enough in Marriage Anymore. Let's slow this down and get really clear on something that you've probably never questioned before. And that is that a relationship is not a role. A role is a function. You perform it. You're measured by output. You're evaluated by results. And you can be good at a role and still fall flat at a relationship. That's the gap that so many men are stuck in. Providing is a role, protecting is a role. They're important and they're necessary, but they are not the relationship. A relationship is how two people experience each other over time, how safe it feels to speak honestly, how responsibility is shared, how conflict is handled, how emotions are managed, how accountability shows up when things are uncomfortable. Those require a completely different skill set. Here's where things start to break down. Many men believe that bringing in money or paying the bills and being reliable should somehow translate into being seen as a good husband, into being appreciated for efforts at work, into closeness, into sex. That assumption makes sense if you were never taught otherwise. You were taught to work, to provide, to show up. I hear that all the time. I know you guys take that very, very seriously. You do handle responsibilities. So when you do those things and the relationship still feels distant or disconnected, it's confusing and it feels unfair. It feels like somehow the rules have changed. What's really happening is much simpler than that. You're performing a role and expecting it to carry in to the relationship. At work, that logic holds. You do your job, you meet expectations, you keep your position, and you get paid. At home, that same mindset turns efforts into expectations. Like, I showed up, I worked hard, I paid for things, so why don't I feel wanted? From her side, it doesn't feel like a partnership. It feels like an obligation. Now, money matters. Reliability matters. I'm not denying it. But you need to understand that those are the baseline of adult life. They are not evidence of emotional connection. A marriage doesn't deepen because someone functions well. Specifically, someone functions well at work. It deepens because both people feel emotionally safe inside it. That safety comes from how you respond when she's frustrated, how you handle disappointment, how you manage your own anger and resentment, how much emotional labor she's carrying without having to ask. This is why so many women describe feeling like the manager of the relationship, like a project manager. They're tracking details, anticipating reactions, managing the emotional tone, carrying the weight of connection. And when a man points to his job, his hours, his paycheck, his success, she doesn't feel supported. She feels alone. If you recognize yourself here, I want you to know that this isn't a character flaw. It's a misunderstanding that's been costing you connection. You've been showing up as a worker in a place that requires a partner. No amount of money, status, hours, consistency can replace the relational skills your marriage actually needs. That is why this cycle keeps repeating. Here's what often follows when roles-based thinking stays in place. A man believes he's doing what matters most. He's working, he's providing, he's protecting, he's handling responsibilities, and slowly he starts to feel like their relationship is one-sided. He notices the lack of affection, the distance, the drop in sex. From his side, it feels like effort with no upside, no return. From her side, something very different is happening. She experiences him as present in function, but absent in connection. Yes, he's reliable, he's predictable, he's physically there, but emotionally, totally different story. She feels alone. When conversations get uncomfortable, he shuts down or gets defensive. When she's disappointed, he takes it personally. When she brings something up, it feels like a complaint instead of just information sharing. Over time, she learns that it's way easier to just carry things herself than to risk another bad reaction. This is exactly where disconnection starts. And it might not be with some big fight. It might just be with small adjustments. Things like that she stops asking and she stops sharing and she stops reaching for you. And he doesn't notice at first, but when he notices the lack of appreciation, the lack of desire, and that feeling that nothing he does is enough, that's when resentment shows up. That's when he starts tracking effort and counting dates and counting chores and counting hours worked or money brought in or trips or gifts. He thinks, but I'm doing my part. What he doesn't see is how that mindset is shaping the relationship. Because when effort is tracked, connection becomes conditional. Many men unknowingly bring a workplace model home, like benchmarks and expected outcomes and performance reviews. If you do this, I should get that. That approach works at work, but fails in a relationship. At home, it turns a wife into a manager and intimacy to be a reward system. From her side, that feels exhausting. She doesn't feel chosen. She feels evaluated, and she feels like she's responsible for his sense of success or failure in the marriage. And over time, It just kills attraction. I want you to know it's not necessarily just because she's cold or that she doesn't care. It's because desire doesn't grow in environments where someone feels managed, pressured, or responsible for another adult's emotional state. The man feels confused. He thinks he's showing up and he thinks he's being steady. He thinks he's being dependable and doing what he was taught to do. But what she needs is not more output. She needs emotional presence, like ownership, a partner who can sit with discomfort without turning it into blame or withdrawal. If you recognize yourself here, this isn't about being a bad husband. Nobody is assigning blame here. It's about using a system that doesn't belong in a relationship. And until that shifts, both of you will continue to lose. When most men hear the word protecting, they think of physical safety, like keeping your family out of harm's way, providing security, and being strong when things go wrong. That definition probably made sense in another time, but today, the threats that erode a marriage are rarely physical. What damages relationships now is emotional instability, unmanaged anger, defensiveness, withdrawal, resentment that leaks out sideways. Protection today looks different. It looks like emotional steadiness. Can you stay present when she's upset without making it about you? Can you hear disappointment without shutting down or lashing out? Can you tolerate discomfort without needing to escape or fix things? For many women, the greatest risk in a relationship is not danger, it's emotional exhaustion. They are constantly scanning for reactions, choosing their words carefully, and deciding what is worth bringing up and what isn't. That's not safety, that's vigilance. And vigilance kills closeness. A man who protects his marriage now is someone who regulates himself. He doesn't outsource his emotional state to his wife. He doesn't expect her to manage his disappointment. He doesn't make her responsible for keeping the peace. He takes ownership of his own reactions and notices when resentment is building, and he addresses it before it hardens. This is where many men push back. They think this sounds soft or unfair or like they're being asked to change who they really are, and it's not at all that. The truth is, this is leadership. Emotional leadership is what allows women to relax inside their relationship. When she feels safe to speak, she'll stay engaged. When she feels safe to disappoint you, she'll stay close. When she doesn't have to manage your emotions, that's when desire has any room to grow. And that's why so many women in midlife pull away. They're tired. They have spent years holding the emotional center of the relationship. And when they finally stop, men feel blindsided. Protection isn't about control. It isn't about power. It isn't about providing more even. It's about becoming someone your wife can emotionally lean on. And that is what most men are never taught how to do. It's the work that changes everything. This is the point where the work turns inward. Not toward what you do, but toward how you show up. When a relationship feels tense or disconnected, most men don't pause and reflect. They revert. What I observe is that they fall back on the places in which they spend the most time and get the most reward. They fall back on their jobs. They work harder. They provide more. They stay busy. That all makes sense, sure. Being a provider is the role they've practiced the longest. It's where they feel competent. It's where effort produces results, but when that instinct shows up at home, it creates distance. Because providing is a role, and relationships require a different skill set. Some men double down on effort, more work, more responsibility, more doing. Others withdraw. They get quieter. They check out emotionally. They avoid confrontation, and they call it peace. Both responses feel different. Both rely on the same thing, the role. Effort becomes armor. Work becomes protection. Busyness becomes distance. Providing becomes proof. And it's not because a man doesn't care. It's because that effort is entirely familiar. The problem is that effort blocks intimacy when it replaces presence. When you're focusing on providing your value, you're not available for connection. This is where the questions start to matter. How am I showing up when things feel uncomfortable? Am I present or am I performing? Am I trying to understand her and her experience? Or am I relying on what I already know how to do and have been doing for years? Am I staying engaged? Or am I retreating and calling it self-control? Doubling down and withdrawing are both ways of avoiding the work of partnership. Another question that matters here is, am I trying to earn connection or am I creating it? Earning kind of keeps score. It waits for the results. Creating requires presence. It asks something different of you. And this is honestly where I see so many of you get stuck. Most men don't have that relational skill yet, so they just keep applying the one that they know. But that skill doesn't fit here, and continuing to rely on it won't produce a different outcome today, next week, or next year. Many men who make this shift stop asking, why isn't this working? And they start asking a better question, which is, who am I being inside this relationship? That question is where real change begins. This work doesn't come naturally to most men. They were trained to be useful, to produce, to push through, and they learned early on that effort created their value. Results earned respect, and very few were taught how to stay emotionally engaged or emotional at all when things felt uncertain, when they were disappointing or tense. You guys, it doesn't make you bad men or bad husbands. It just means that you were never given the skills nor trained for what is required in a partnership. And this is really important. I want you to know that this kind of work and this training, it's not your wife's job to teach you. She isn't there to teach you emotional maturity. She isn't there to guide your growth, and she is not there to tolerate trial and error while carrying the relationship. That responsibility belongs to you. This is also why midlife becomes such a turning point. By this stage, many women have quietly been carrying the emotional weight of the relationship for years. They tracked needs and anticipated reactions, and they adjusted themselves to keep things steady. And at some point, they stop. More often than not, it's not accompanied with a threat. And it's not some big dramatic moment. They just stop quietly carrying. When that happens, men often feel blindsided. They think that something suddenly changed. What changed is that her carrying ended. This is why providing and protecting aren't enough anymore. And it's not because those things don't matter, they do. It's just that they don't address what's actually at risk. What's at risk is connection. You already feel it. What's at risk is emotional safety and desire. A marriage doesn't break all at once. It wears down. And when one person feels emotionally alone inside of it, that's the moment that something needs to change. And this is the exact moment that asks for something different from you. Again, don't revert back to old patterns. We're not asking for more effort, not more proof, not more money. It requires presence and self-awareness and ownership of your own growth. And while that work is uncomfortable, it's also stabilizing. Men who take responsibility for developing these skills stop feeling perpetually behind. They stop trying to earn closeness through effort. They stop waiting for their partner to respond differently first. They start showing up as partners. And that shift changes the tone of the relationship. It also changes what becomes possible. If you're honest, you already know whether this is you or not. If you know you default to work when things feel tense, I see you. You know if effort has become your shield. You know if you've been doing your part and quietly wondering why it still feels like you're failing. You don't need more time to figure that out. What you may be waiting on is proof that something will change on its own. I'm here to tell you it won't. It won't. I also want you to know it's not because your marriage is doomed. But I will say that repeating the same role in a relationship that needs something different doesn't lead anywhere new. Here's the part that most men don't say out loud. Waiting feels way safer than changing. Staying busy feels way more productive. Doing what you know how to do feels responsible, but years pass that way. And one day, the distance isn't subtle anymore. It's so silent, and that silence is loud. Effort required is just heavier, and the resentment is somehow just baked in. Providing and protecting won't stop that from happening. Only learning how to show up differently will move the needle. No, I don't want you to sit here and blame yourself. It's about deciding not to live another year stuck in a role that isn't working. And you do not need your wife to change first. You don't need another conversation with her that goes nowhere. You don't need to keep hoping things will somehow soften on their own. You need support, learning the skills that actually belong in a relationship. That's the work that I do. If you're ready to stop waiting and start changing how this feels, then book a relationship clarity call with me. You're right, this won't fix your marriage overnight, but it will help you get clarity and direction and a clear path forward that actually fits the life you're in now. You don't need to wait around for things to get worse for you to take this seriously. Start right now. Book a call. See you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.